So,
Go ahead, Javier.
yeah, thank you. All right, friends, here we are again, and we're on the second chapter of our series on the urgency of change. This is Krishnamurti's book, as you will have seen from the website. It's split it into six. We split it into six sessions, and we had the first session 2 weeks ago on the question of how to live in this world, which is a fundamental question for all of us. And as part of that, from Krishnamurti's perspective, there is just simply the question of awareness, which is what we're looking at today. So there's our second chapter. I titled it Awareness. It's just a general title for it. And I included in it a series of chapters. That's how I did it. I picked a major topic, and then I associated with different chapters which I feel are part, generally within the scope of the theme. And in this case, of course, you can see that the chapters that we chose, perception, seeing the whole, are very much, of course, along the lines of awareness. And then you have discipline and learning. Now, discipline and learning, you would say, would be part of awareness, but mostly I put it there because I'm aware of the fact that Krishnamurti put what he called the art of living at the heart of his teachings. And what he called the art of living involved the arts of seeing, the arts of listening, the art of learning, and of course the art of communication, he put it sometimes, or the art of questioning. So I see it within that framework, right? Of course, he talked about awareness, he talked about attention, concentration, and insight. So we're going to see if we can unfold that. I put learning, therefore, and I put discipline in there because these two, actually, discipline and learning mean the same for Krishnamurti. Discipline doesn't mean, subject yourself to some kind of regimented structure of behavior. Don't whip yourself about anything so that you become good. That's what discipline generally means. It means learning. And indeed, if you look it up in the dictionary, you will see that they give you an etymological meaning from Latin, which means to learn. So a disciple is one who learns, and in learning, there is no such torture. There's no reward and punishment, no authority, no conformity. So that's why they are there. The two last headings really mean the same: discipline and learning. So there you have it. We're going to go through this, see if we can unfold it a little bit, because as far as I'm concerned, and if you studied Krishnamurti, and you have all pretty much have done that, the whole question of living. So we started with the question of how to live in this world. Krishnamurti had a problem with how. He said there's no how because there is learning. We're going to see if there is a how to learning. If there's no how to learning, maybe there's no how to any of it, right? But it is the art of living, see, how to live in this world. Art, he understood to mean to put everything in its right place. And it means that therefore, there is no conflict. The essence of the art of living is freedom from conflict. And there is only freedom from conflict if we can stay with the facts. But to stay with the facts, we have to be aware of them without division, fragmentation. They have to be perceived in their totality and not partially. So for him, this is the essence of conflict: partial perception, partial understanding, and therefore the implicit division, disagreement, contradiction between what we think and what we see, and what therefore needs to be done. For him, this contradiction arises because of the partiality of our knowledge, inherent partiality of knowledge. When we look with knowledge, then we don't see the totality. We have to see knowledge also totally, which is an interesting question. We're going to see that there are a number of issues that arise from this exploration which have not such easy answers. Or maybe they do. Maybe we're going to learn something together. I hope so. So first, he starts with awareness. Now, we all know this word generally means, I looked it up in a dictionary just to make sure that we are aware of what the word means, right? So it means knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. Knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. That's what the dictionary says. The dictionary, as you know, is the repository of the meanings that we collectively have put together. And when we speak, those meanings are coming through, whether we like it or not, because they belong to that common consciousness. It means a concern about and interest in a particular situation or development. And then is associated similarly with consciousness. So awareness and consciousness, to be aware of something is to be conscious of something. Recognition, I'm aware of that. So it means to recognize it, realize it, and know it. But K, I think, basically looks at it as perception of fact without necessarily previous knowledge. That's an interesting little dialogue that he's having with the dictionary. He uses it especially, he has been using it in his teachings, especially in the expressions passive awareness. He used that a lot initially, and then he made it more definitely by using the expression choiceless awareness. Essentially, perception without interference of previous conditioned, as he calls it, knowledge or identification or judgment. So that was his thing, not to choose, not to interfere, not to bring one's preferences to bear on that which one is looking at from prejudices and so on. So when he's always talking about awareness, he's always talking about what impedes awareness. He goes negatively about it, being aware that when he's not aware, maybe the beginning of awareness. I mean, we're not playing with words, really. One is aware that one is not aware, right? There is awareness already, right? So that's important. Now, he, in the first chapter on awareness, does something very interesting I've never seen him do before, which is just describe different levels of awareness. So levels of awareness, what? And he suggests that actually awareness, if it's carried through, I'm not sure he would accept that expression, but if it's carried through, has a depth because it involves the mind, and therefore it has a depth in the mind, brings out the true depth of mind, the true quality of perception that transcends the superficial sensory movement as well as the movement of thought. So there's a mind and a perception that goes beyond both, may include them in some manner, but goes beyond both. So what are these levels? He says there's a superficial, calls it superficial. We don't know. A sensory level, I would put it that way, which is mostly directed to the outer, so-called. So the perception of a tree. He always began with that. When I first read Kay, I was astonished that he made it look very simple. Because he said, all it means is, can you see or are you blind? Your life depends on it. I said, what? This is a bit funny. Why? It depends on what you think and what you believe and what values you hold. No, how you perceive. So he said, have you ever looked at a tree? I looked at 1,000 trees. I've been born in the rural area, which is a forested area, and I've seen, I actually passed them mostly by, as it turns out, but I've looked at trees, I've seen trees. But he said, no, you haven't looked at the tree. So he already stopped me in my tracks. My knowledge of having looked at the tree is not the same as looking at the tree. So I started looking at trees because he asked me, have you looked? Are you looking? More than that, have you looked? That means the past already, right? But are you looking? And I realized I'm not looking. See, aware that you're not aware. So start looking, and boy, the trees began to show multiple new aspects, which I thought I knew. See, there's a lot of pine trees here and a lot of oak trees. And I know pine trees and I know oak trees. I know them, but I don't see them. So he started playing with this thing of what you know prevents seeing. And if you don't see, you're not in contact with the thing, and actually, you don't know it. It's a contradiction in my relationship with even the trees. So then he pushed it further and said, have you looked at your father? Boy, was that difficult. I knew my father. See again, knowledge versus seeing. I knew my father to be someone that I was afraid of him anyway. He was an aggressive person as far as I was concerned, see? So he said, have you looked at your father? Are you looking at your father? And does your father make you afraid, or there is fear in you that you're projecting on your father? I said, oh, Jesus, this is complicated. So what I did, I started looking at my father. And of course, he was maybe what I had thought, but he was also a suffering human being for whom I have felt compassion because he was a victim, like he was trying to make me a victim of his aggression. He had been a victim of other people's aggressions, and he went down the line. So I began to, my feeling for my father changed. If we look, we see. And if we see, we feel. And if we feel, we relate differently. There was a change. He says, have you looked at yourself? Jesus is getting close to home, right? Already. Have you seen people? Have you looked at your teachers? Have you looked at everybody? Have you looked at your father? That was close to home. And now me. What is me? Well, me is just a movement of thought, feeling, sensation, and action. That's me. But I think I am this and I am that. And I am a struggle. I am the sum of knowledge, of experience, of perception, that whole thing. So he said, how deeply do you see that? Or what again, do you know yourself? Do you have an idea of yourself? Or are you really looking? That the same we do to ourselves internally, the same that we do to people outwardly, as well as to trees. The idea takes over, the thing vanishes behind the screen of the image. We vanish behind us, the screen of our image, like just we hide our fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters behind their images, and the trees become vague, worse than impressionist paintings behind the images we bring to bear on them. This is a challenge, because that is implied in that is the quality of relationship. Relationship, as he put it, is life. And if that image is standing in between, there's no real contact. There's no real love. There is not even beauty. The whole thing is, for him, is tremendous. This simple act of seeing or not seeing, indeed, life depends on it. The quality of life. We can survive as automatons, as robots. But do we live? And this is the challenge, to live holistically, completely. So going back, that's the bigger picture, if you like, no? That it is indeed that central an issue, right? Being aware or not being aware is the same as being seeing or being blind, and therefore relating or not relating holistically, if you like, fully relating at all, really. So first level, sensation. And he says, there's no problem in that. Well, I just described the problem. If we look with images, even a tree, we will have something in between. We won't be seeing, right? But he says, well, generally, we can carry that objectively. You can go and see the tree because it's something independent of us. That's another aspect. And we can also, we can see we have applied it scientifically. So science can extend that kind of perception to the very depths of the universe. And he has no problem with it. He says there's no object and subject there. It's just a sensation, de constatation, like he put it, I think the Canadians can understand it, de constatation du fait de la existence des choses. So you verify that things exist, right? It's just simple. You verify that things are there. But then those things are not just themselves, and there's not just sensation and the information that comes with it. He generally doesn't talk about information, but that is important, actually. Every time we look anew, new information comes through. If we look with the old information, the new is banished from our perception. So we fail to connect actually with the actual fullness of the actuality, the totality of it. But information does come through. Otherwise, knowledge would have been impossible, right? And insight would have been impossible. And insight is a very important aspect of the breaking through of perception to things that are actually deeply hidden, to see inside. How do we see into quantum mechanics or relativity or even gravitational principle? We have to go far, far in our observations to come upon those deeper laws of reality. But then we come with a psychological response. I don't like this. I like that. He always says this thing, liking or not liking, right? There is a preference of me in relation to things. Is the me coming in as the filter through which the world, with which I relate to the world. The world exists for me, in relation to me, not necessarily objectively by itself, right? So that, he says, that begins a little bit of an issue, because then we are really not seeing things and not relating to them. And we're fragmenting our perceptions to begin with. That preference itself fragments a perception. We choose to look at and pursue what we like, and we reject what we don't like, right? So, but he says we're not often aware of this, of these reactions. And to be aware of these reactions constitute a second level of awareness. So it's a sensation, one level, external, outer. This awareness of our reactions, second level. It's more inner, if you like. But then he switches the tables on his own argument and says, actually, there are two movements which are similar. If we can look at both as the same thing, the sensation of the tree and the awareness of thought when reacting to the tree, we can see them both in the same way. If we look at them, he says, without judgment, because we also judge our reactions. First thing, we have to be aware of the reaction, right? Which he says we're often not even aware. Why are we not aware? Because the reaction itself says, I am aware. It's a trick. It's a magical trick. I am aware. I see the tree. But actually what I see is my image of the tree, and I'm not aware of that image. Being aware of images is subtle. More often than not, we don't seem to catch it. It's a very quick phenomenon. That there may be first a sensation, an actual contact with the actuality, but that triggers a very quick response from the psyche, such that the image imposes itself. And from then on, the image is the dominant factor in so-called perception. So that, to see that, and to see it in exactly the same way as one will look at the tree, without judgment, becomes, as far as I'm concerned, a third level. To see the two movements as one movement. I don't know if you played with that. To be aware of sensation and of thought and feeling at the same time. It's very challenging. I mean, the few times I tried it, but it's delightful, because then thought is no longer in opposition to sensation. It's just one more sensation. The image, the sound, the concept, whatever it comes through, is still a sensation. It's still something you hear. It's still something you feel. It's like the tree. It's like the tree is lighted, not lighted, in the rain, or in whatever you feel for the tree as well. You feel for the tree. Right? Feeling is authentic. It's not always fake. It's not always brought up from memory. Things produce feeling. Painters discovered this. The Impressionists were very good at it. They knew that if you put a certain color, you got a certain feeling. And the world is color. So the world is feeling, right? It's perception and feeling. So that's authentic. But then we paint it with our own preferences, with our own colors. And that is no longer the same world. So this is a third thing, I think, which is very interesting to try that, to be aware, Because most of the time, of course, and even Krishnamurti does this, says to be aware, thought must be absent because it's just noise in the psyche. It's just the projector of images that prevents seeing. But actually, there is a bit of a tricky situation there, in my opinion, because we have to be able to see thought. See thought without thought? Is that what he's saying? That we have to see, when he says about a choiceless awareness, he means to watch thought without interfering with its movement as one more sensation. You know that when that happens, it's a very wonderful moment, right? Most of the time, somehow, the awareness seems to be so stuck in thought, in the projection of the observer, that we are not able to see it. So this is an art. This is part of why this is an art. It's not necessarily a technique, though people may have technique, but it's a necessary discovery of this detachment of the observation from the observer. And the observer then coming into the observation is seen. The past is just, the observer is just a response from the past. So that can be seen. Why can't it be seen? That's a matter of investigation for each of us, how aware we are as to how the presence of the past is determining the way we see things and the way we relate to things and people. That's a very important aspect, because when we are aware of it, it really ceases to be the problem that we think it is. We're trying to just go against the stream of thought because we think is going against our life and is fragmenting it, which it is, but it's fragmenting it only when we are not aware of it. That's what I come up with. So that changes a bit the tables on this duality that we have with thinking in terms of being aware. If we are aware of thought as it responds, that duality ends. Awareness puts an end to duality in its true meaning, right? And then there is a fourth level he comes up with, as far as I was concerned. I will be happy with this third level, if that's what it is. Levels is a tricky matter because it's just one movement, right, of awareness. It just moves from one thing to the other. It's a continuum for him. It's not like now you jump. Well, but there is elements of unawareness at each level, right? So moving as a swift movement from one to the other is not that easy necessarily, right? So that's what we're talking about. But he says there's a fourth level at which there is the awareness of the movement of time, that it is time. It's not just that is the awareness of the past interfering, is the awareness of time. And the very awareness of time is what brings about the quality of silence. I don't know anything about it. I'm just trying to understand. He presents us with a very subtle movement because in the end, this means the ending of time. The suspension of time as the quintessence of the opening of awareness to a totally different dimension of perception, which has no time in it, which could be called, I don't know what you would call it, but sometimes he calls it insight, right? The perception that has no time in it. This is what he says there, right? Basically, so perception is what it is about, and how do we perceive? And he has pretty much the same traces the same issues, right? But one of the aspects that he talks about perception is how we perceive ourselves. He's very interested in that because he's talking about self-knowledge as the key to human transformation. So if we don't see ourselves, self-knowledge is a bit not necessarily the right expression, because he says there has to be learning here. Perception means seeing without this past, seeing without time. So we are time, and this is what he comes up with. The self is time. Is it? Self says, I'm not time. I'm out of time. I just manage time. I'm sort of moving time around my memories, but I'm not memory. Now it says, this is a trick of the mind. The self without memory doesn't exist. You can pretend that it is beyond time and beyond memory, and that it's an authentic perceiver, but actually it's not. It is conditioned. To have that insight is very important. And to have that insight, we need to look at ourselves also without the image that we have about ourselves. Why is this important? Because of the sense that consciousness, as we know it, is indeed conditioned. And we're talking about the art of living, which is to live free from conflict. And this conditioning is the self, is at the heart of division and conflict as far as he's concerned. So the understanding of the self, the dissolution of the self in the light of understanding is critical, fundamental, if we are to be whole and relate to one another without the usual divisions and conflicts that we know. So we're talking about that. Now, how do we look at ourselves, right? Do we look at ourselves directly, factually, without contradiction? Or our own looking at ourselves is embroiled in contradiction? Because we have an image. The image is contradictory. Because I have an image of what I should be. He says this, right? If you have an image of what you should be, when you look at yourself, you look with that image. And therefore, you're already judging what you're looking at. And generally, we don't measure up to the image of what we should be. So he says we get depressed. And therefore, or whatever, maybe these people have a great image of themselves and they feel they're fitting into it. Maybe that's what pride means, right? Arrogance means, look at me. I really am what I think I am and I should be. And therefore, great me. Well, maybe, but you see, things will come along which will deny that. And these poor fellows will go into a rage. We are in conflict. The image is conflictual because it wants to sustain only one side of what we are. We are multiple. We are varied. Like he used to say, now you're intelligent and sensitive. Turn around the corner and you're stupid and dumb. So which one are you? He said, oh, no, I am only intelligent and sensitive. So the self divides because it chooses. The choice of image represents its own duality and its own conflict. To not choose, therefore, becomes totally very important, see? Not to sustain the internal conflict between one image and another. It's just two images, two sides of the same coin. Right? So to drop what you should be, you shouldn't be anything. I mean, I don't know if anybody would say this, to come to your kid and say, look, I recommend to live rightly and to really master the art of living. You shouldn't be anything. Everybody says the opposite, right? You must be something. You must achieve. You must progress this way. You must become. The notion of becoming is this, right? And that's the whole cultural structure, the structure of morality and the rest is what should be, what we must be, what's best to be, right? Which is in opposition to a lot of what we are. Right? Whereas Case says, no, this is the art of living. And the art of living is the art of seeing. And the art of seeing is the art of learning. And the art of learning is the art of freedom. Wait a minute. Too many words that don't have any content. So we have to give in some content, right? The art of seeing is the art of learning. And to see, we must be free from images. When we're free from images, we see what is. What is always new. And that learning is the contact with the newness. And freedom is the ending of the conflictual factors which are dissolved in the act of learning. Learning goes together with freedom. Why does it go together with freedom? Because we were limited by the past, by conditioning, we can't learn. The learning is merely the learning of experience. This is very interesting. I don't know, you must, I hope you puzzled a bit over that whole thing about learning from experience. I'm still puzzling about it because he sees in experience the denial of real learning is learning within the known, within the pattern of the known. But he says this is important still, has its own place. The art of living means put everything in its right place, right? So he says knowledge and learning from experience has its right place. We learn physically about all kinds of things through observation and the rest, through experimentation. Science is that field, and boy, it can go very far. So knowledge, learning that way, accumulation is essential. And that knowledge is fundamental when required in action. And often it is required in action. We couldn't really function very well, and not at the level of sophistication that we have now, without it. So that will go on, he said. We will keep on exploring further into this field. But where we're not learning from experience is our own psychological experience. He says, they made some very interesting comment. He always makes this one comment, that we learned, you see, scientifically to build all these wonderful instruments, to go to the moon and see into the depths of space, medicine, engineering, communications, the whole thing, transport. But we have not learned to stop war. We have not learned that nationalism is destructive, that social injustice is what prevents us from relating properly to one another, and therefore the world continues to endure its calamities generation after generation. While improving technically, it remains stagnant in its psychological structures of conflict. Can we not learn the same way? He says partly it is that we apply the same mechanical knowledge of technology to relationship. That is weird. Why shouldn't we apply it? You see, knowledge works so well. You know how to build this bridge. Like he said, we learn how to build wonderful houses, but we don't know how to live in them. That's an extraordinary metaphor for me. You see, we're dwelling on earth, but we don't know how to live in it. And that's what the question is, right? How to live in this world? That's the question. He says the problem is, as I read him, we'll discuss, is that we apply the same mechanical type of knowledge, and knowledge is mechanical, to relationship that we apply to technical matters. But relationship is not mechanical because it's a living thing. And therefore it requires a different approach, a different learning. The learning cannot be from before and refer to before. In a way, the learning of relationship is not the learning of experience. Is it? See, he's denying something very fundamental in our system of belief, in how we are approaching relationship, that for him relationship is a totally different domain. Well, totally, I don't know. It's a different domain, requiring a different quality of learning, a different quality of perception, a different quality of mind and heart and senses. That the sensitivity he's calling for, and he's always leaning on this word, and he leans on it all the time, the quality of sensitivity can't be based on any previous idea, knowledge, remembrance, or even desire. Can be based on anything that thought can possibly produce. That is total freedom. The freedom we're talking about of learning requires the state of awareness in which there is neither accumulation nor projection or expectation, nothing of the sort. That relationship starts and ends in this movement of learning in which there's no knowledge of anything, in which the self, as the observer, is gone. And he says that's called the present. The present is this. And you see, that's very interesting as well. Just look at that to relate means to be present to one another also, right? Not to be pasts that are presented again, represented, not being represented by each other in our desires and hopes. Those may exist, but there's something beyond that really brings about the quality of union and proper relationship. that dissolves the distance, that even in desire there is a distance because there is an image and there is an expectation of pleasure or security or status or whatever it is. It's part of our becoming. It's part of nature too, by the way, there's no denying. But there is that sense of psychologically, we're still pursuing something which is coming and projected from the past. To be aware of that and the fragmentation it introduces into relationship is part of the art, an essential part of the art of living. So there you have it. You see, he put these things. I thought that was wonderful, the way he thought, learning involves. No, discipline. When he talked about discipline, he said involves learning. For him, discipline is learning. Involves austerity. How did he put it? I don't even know if I remember the whole chain. Something like that, no? Yeah, austerity, sensitivity, intelligence, freedom, and seeing the beauty of love. He made a chain there that you normally don't find anywhere, right? So the learning we know, that's what he is actually etymologically so, but beyond etymology, it means, this learning is there, discipline is learning. So the learning is the basis of it all. And learning is to see and to perceive accurately without this fragmentation the knowledge introduces that the me is bound to introduce. So then this is this austerity. Austerity just means that there is a kind of inherent discipline in terms of the action that comes with seeing. It's not austerity traditionally means, there's something like a discipline in the traditional sense of subjecting yourself to some kind of harsh yeah, behavior or norms and so on, right? The austere way of living with little, with a regimented way of life. He says, no. It means, in a way, a simplicity that comes with learning itself. I like that very much. He said that, he put it as one of the keys of the so-called holistic way of living, or religious way of living, which were humility and involves austerity and simplicity. That when we look, we cannot look unless we're simple. You could say that in the act of learning, there is an inbuilt austerity, in that one is no longer emphasizing one's own possession of knowledge or of that which one is looking at. There's not that movement. So austerity is part of the denial of self. You see, the self is possession. The self exists in that field. Austerity is the denial of possession. And that is part of learning. So that's how I look at it in the deeper sense of that word, because that word is strange. We no longer use it very much, right? But for Kay, it has a profound meaning. And I think he has it in that sense, that it means the emptying of that focus of attention and his knowledge, which is its possession. And then, of course, sensitivity is what comes through. Intelligence is the perception that comes through sensitivity. And for that to be, there has to be freedom from all that accumulation from the self. And then he says, if that happens, there is the beauty of love is there. All righty, we'll proceed. A lot in this stuff. You can ask anything you want or comment anything you want. This is free.
Hello, Javier. It's
Yeah,
Laura.
all right.
Well, I thought I would ask because I was reading the chapter that said seeing the whole,
Oh,
which has
yes.
always been a question for me. I always wondered, how can one see the whole of anything? One doesn't, one only sees in part. It didn't, and what is it that would see in the mean seeing the whole? And I was quite interested in his reply because he says when you are just focused on a part, um, actually that in itself can be destructive. I don't know, where does he use that?
Yeah.
Whether watching your anger or whatever it is, it's actually strengthened. And this has always been a question for me too, that I think that watching what comes up in human consciousness can be very, very difficult. I mean, it can take you over, really. I mean, because these are powerful emotions and whatever, you can't necessarily deal with them. So it can actually cause its own problems. There's a certain danger involved with it. Maybe I used to think that sometimes he should sort of warn people, and I felt there was kind of a warning in this when they were talking about seeing the whole. And so how do you see the whole? It seems to be you need to be using every part of your mind or what. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if you have anything to comment on that, but I just strengthening the particular looking or focusing on what comes up can make it even worse in some way. So
But you understand that much?
I
I'm not
think
sure.
so.
I'm not even.
Maybe.
I'm not sure I understand even that much. Let's
I don't know
see.
if I understand that. But I do feel it's very powerful what we have in our consciousness. And yes, it
Yeah.
can just,
Yeah. Yes.
derail you.
How is it that, how do we, if you like, how do we solve our problems, right? He says, all our problems psychologically, say anger, takes
Mm,
anger in this instance, right? We can
mm,
explore, I think we should explore that because there are a number of questions there which to me are still unclear. One is
mm.
this, what does it mean to see something as a whole? Now, I
I
understand,
don't.
yeah, right. Oh, sorry, Nora. Do you want to say?
No, no, I don't. That's always a question. I didn't even.
Yeah, yeah. It is the
How
question
can
because
you see the whole of anything? Yeah.
because unless we see something as a whole, the only way to solve these psychological issues is to see them as a whole. Partial perception won't end them. It's only the perception of them as a whole puts an end to them. And we're saying, yes, I want to finish my anger. I want to finish my greed, my fear, my aggression. We want to put an end to a lot of things, right? We know that we have this problem with ourselves. We have some contradictions in our behavior, even in the way we think. We have developed certain psychological habits, and we are conditioned. And there are all kinds of reactions that come out over which we have no control, and which we want to control. We want to be able to get rid of, even, right?
Mm.
And we're struggling. This is just the human condition overall. Everybody is struggling with something. You could write that, I think, on the wall, on the Great Wall of China. Everybody's struggling with something. Don't approach. You see, that's the thing, right? This is even, I believe it was Plato saying, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle, right? It's an invitation to compassion. Just let's be aware of that universal fact. Most of us, the vast majority of us, hopefully there are a few who are free, or many, hope many, who are free from this inner struggle. We are struggling with something, or we accommodate to that something and accept the contradiction. We do whatever, right? But he says, well, freedom or the art of living means putting everything in its right place. When there is conflict, it means things are out of place. So we're not artists. We're not living artistically. We're not living wholly as a whole in this dynamic manner. So he says you have to see anger as a whole. If you focus on only anger, you won't see the whole because anger is actually the result of a vast network of other issues. So it has to be seen as a whole for anger to end. What sense does that make? What does it mean, seeing the whole then? Does he mean? All right, I will pose more questions. That's all I can
Well,
do.
I'm wondering if he's not talking about the quality of the seer.
Yes,
Uh,
he's talking about
that
quality.
that in other words, the seer is not fragmented.
Yes, right. Exactly. So the first thing is what? Therefore, not fragmenting the seer. So how do we do that with, not how do we do that? What does that mean in relation to anger? You're an angry, aggressive fellow, Dan.
Right.
And
And you're being with the anger, and you're seeing this anger with without a fragmented mind, without a fragmented seer. Like the seeing is not coming from a fragmented agent or whatever.
so you're not separating yourself from anger.
No, not at all.
You're not even saying anger is horrible in me. I want to get rid of this.
Um, but what I'm well, what I think he's I kind of think that he's talking about the quality of the seer.
Yes, but this is what we're saying. How we approach these things, right? With a concept, what I should be. I'm angry. I should not be angry.
But I think what I found that very interesting as well. I think what he's talking about here is you need to look also at the relationship of anger to everything else, which is there basically. Yeah? And I find that interesting also because, as Nora said, I mean, if you just look at anger and you really put all your attention on it, it kind of strengthens it. That's what the questioner said, and so on. So, but that is, in my understanding, what kind of staying with what is meant. I mean, you are angry, there's anger, so you stay with this, so you really try to understand it. But is that really what? I mean, and here he says something different. He says, I mean, look at your anger, but that is the particular, that's the fragment. And that's not the way to do it. I mean, understand what anger means in the context of the present, basically. Yeah? I mean, like for me, that would mean what impact does the anger has on the situation, on the other person, yeah, or maybe. So I think that I found quite interesting, really.
I did too. I thought, wow, let's see. So if you feel your anger, right? Do we sense even that anger is connected, is actually coming out of a larger network of issues, of elements? My anger is not just one thing that sort of kicks out, reacts in a particular situation and is that's it. But there is a network of connections which determine this reaction. It's coming out of some deeper, or maybe coming out of a deeper root. There are all these issues that we're discussing of anger, aggression, fear, pleasure, habit, conditioning, you name it, have one common root. What does it mean that they are interrelated? It means either that they have a broader network or that they have a common root. See, that may be also part of the meaning. That was I was questioning for myself.
Yeah.
Is he maybe pointing to a common root? And if we see the root, then we've understood the tree. Is that it?
Maybe.
All good questions.
Yeah, this is the art of questioning. He said that was part of the art of living, is the art of questioning. Huh? He said that. I mean, he was pushing us all the time that you're not questioning far enough. So, all right, let's give it a go. So we have to question. See, the art of questioning is fundamental also in the art of living. It's not like everything is going to be given to us
Yeah.
without, working for it. You have to dig, like they say. You have to do a little digging to get to the
Yeah.
root. Like he said of
Well,
awareness deepening, we're talking about deepening our awareness of
right.
the causes and roots of our problems. So what that is roots? Is there a common root? He's sort of pointing his teachings to there being a common root. But when I'm in anger, I don't see any common root. I see anger. I'm just the good old aggressive me. And I want to
Yes,
get rid of that part.
I become the anger. I'm consumed by the anger.
But then I separate myself from the anger. I said, want to get rid of this. So I want to get to the reaction and get rid of it. And sometimes it works. Some people have been free from these things, right? You remember a friend of mine told me that he used to be very jealous in relation to his girlfriends and so on. And then one day he just said, all right, I've been listening to Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti says, sit with it and observe it like it is and let it be and stay with it. And he said, I did that. And my jealousy disappeared. And I don't even know how. The good old boy stayed with it and he went. But he had other problems, you see. So you can end one thing seemingly, at least in his case, it worked like that. So it works. If you finish one thing, right? One fear here or one conditioning there. And Krishnamurti says, there's something deeper that is still, you eliminated one branch, but there are several other branches. And that is the fact of the matter is that this tree is yet not whole. It is some dead leaves somewhere. Branches are not all green and shining and flowering. This tree is not flowering fully, partial flowering, and you managed to trim one dead branch. That's good, thank you. But hey, the rot is still there. Could we get to the heart of it? To see the whole as the disease, to understand the full extent and depth of this disease. Miles, you got the heavens behind you.
I do. Yes. I'm out on the kayak on the river. And this is my favorite place to engage with you, Javier, and the group here. Thank you for all the preliminary information. It seems like this root, at least from my experience, I just call it stick handling of all these things. So you mentioned anger, fear, anxiety, all these things that I seem to want to avoid. But then we say this word injection is injected, this my or mine or my anger. Well, anger is different than my anger. You see, as soon as it becomes mine, money is different than my money. so
that's for sure.
so there's a my in there. It's a separation, and I think a lot of the wisdom spiritual traditions point to it, and it seems to me it's the root. We can question that maybe if this notion of being separate, am I even separate? And it seems to me as a naturalist, I just feel like all of these things are allowed. It's quite obvious that they're appearing somewhere, but are they appearing to something that's separate from it? And I don't know. If I want to somehow recognize the whole movement, then I feel like the my has to disappear. Like as soon as there's the observer of the river, there's two things, and it seems if there's just the river, there's no problem. It's just experience happening, not even one moment to the next. I mean, the wholeness of it is just an emptiness. So I don't see the problem from, it's not even a from. If I am that, what's the issue, of any of it? I am anger. I'm just it. That's what's occurring. the interpretation that comes after it, by my metacognitive mind, the re-asking of these questions, everything is but but we seem to think that that's somehow the thing in itself. And you spoke about that, which I really enjoyed, behind the image. So I would just propose, or maybe question, whether or not the root has something to do with this feeling of a separate self, stick handling
that may be
these
the root.
things.
I was
Maybe that's the root.
I was going to comment on something along those lines myself, because I see the root as the creation of, and the belief in, and the protection of, and the ability to see the world only from the self perspective. And so when Nora asked the question, can we see sort of all of it? My limited self can't. My limited conditioned self can't see it. It can only see fragments. And so the more I hang on to and believe in myself as the center of the universe, because that is how we normally view through our own center of self, then I'm further away from being able to see the whole. So the loosening of the attachment and the belief in that separate self is, I think, what Krishnamurti is trying to help us see. That's what I get out of some of the readings and the material.
We still have the question: what does it mean to see? No, what does it mean? But we have at least the negative approach. No, as long as we're looking partially, we know we're not seeing the whole. So that much we are aware of, right? And Cave goes very much trust sort of this negative aspect of learning, no? Negative in the sense of what is not, right? To understand love is understanding what love is not. To understand awareness may also be to understand what awareness is not, right? That we are not aware. And that element opens the door to awareness, because already is awareness in principle, right? And he said, don't practice it because every practice is an exercise in inattention, and all our problems arise from inattention. Interesting, that, I thought. Is it that simple, that all these psychological issues are the result of inattention? Is my anger the result of inattention? Is my fear the result of inattention? My pursuit of pleasure the result of inattention? If there were attention, these things would not exist. Because that's how he puts it. That's how he then says, I think that's the logic in this, at least the way I understood it, correct me, that as the result of inattention, the moment we bring attention to bear on them, these problems disappear. Anger goes, fear goes, pleasure goes, the whole thing goes, me goes. Me is the result of inattention. Whoa. Is that correct? See, because he says, oh, when you pay attention, see, what is anger? He talked about anger, right? And anger, he says, is the result of inattention. Is it? Because if it is, like he says, the answer is attention.
Well, what if that word attention is similar to the word of learning, the way he approached learning?
It's the same.
You've got mechanical learning, and you've got learning in relationship, and you've got attention, and you've got this other way of attending to, like being present with what is. So we're getting confused, it sounds like, with the words that are being used and not what he's pointing to. And you were very clear in pointing out mechanical learning from learning in relationship. And they're distinctly different, but they're both learning.
Yes.
And so attention attention to when you're in one particular place, like when you're very much a you, a me, a my, there's attending to, but you're not attending to what you truly are in that time. So you can argue that when I am selfing in my awareness and my presence in the world, I am inattentive to what is, because I am coming from the image of selfing, of that which I believe I am.
Selfing, we have it as an expression, is currency, because it's a very good one, I think. I'm selfing. Excuse me.
I just find that distinction a lot easier to go with attention then, when I make that, just like when I make the distinction of learning.
Yes, attention is where Kay says is the linchpin. It's
Well,
the same as awareness. Well, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
He also talks about the relationship between attention and a quiet mind, a still mind, and that also leads one to the present moment. So the whole thing is all sort of wrapped up. And when you're in the present moment, that's where learning happens.
You also say that you're not in the present moment. You are not in the present moment.
That's right. Everything is in the present moment except us.
Yeah.
You see, that's the trick the mind seems to be good at, to remove itself from the present, because somehow it operates from the past. And that past is just interacting with the present in order to arrive at the future, to fulfill some projection of some kind.
There's a huge amount of psychological gravity between self and the past.
True. I'm not sure it's even gravity. I think it's the very grave of the self. What we're talking about. You see, we're dead. That's what Krishnamurti said. We're at the nucleus of self is dead, right? It's a dead element in there, which again, you see, will be the denial of living fully. So already you have an element that contradicts life at the center of consciousness, whereas the statement "I am" is a statement of being, but he says no, it's a statement of non-being.
Yeah.
Because being is beyond it, right? That's a very, see that, there you have
talks about when I am, love is not.
Sort of thing.
When love is, I am not.
But let's see if we can get to this thing of attention, you see, because Nora's question is still alive. And we're not going necessarily to answer it because it is a challenge of living.
Right.
He says we act totally, and maybe we perceive totally, when we face danger. He always brings that across. That if we really perceive danger, but that's just a question, right? To perceive danger, and he's talking about the danger of this very structure. That the perception of danger, which is what awareness, in fact, deep down implies. See, beware of dog, be aware of dog, means be aware of danger. That awareness, wariness, in even the language, has this sense of being alive to danger. So in the danger is awareness, in the perception of danger is awareness. And that invariably precipitates direct, immediate action without any preconceptions whatsoever. It's a very interesting thing. And I think Kay says, what happens to us is that we don't realize that that is the very nature of life. That life is danger. That every moment is its own totality. We treat it as a part, and in treating it as a part, we create crises which we can resolve with our own partial responses. There has to be a total response. In a way, that's where this totality comes in the picture, maybe, that I'm thinking, that is that life is total in every moment. And to meet it requires the same totality of the observer, if it is that, the quality of observation, not the observer, that in K, is partiality itself. But the sense of to meet the totality of life requires our totality of presence. Huh. I think that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and like the immediacy of life.
And therefore it's a crisis in terms of, or a danger in terms of any assumptions that we have ever made about what is order, what is security, what is love, what is nothing. See, it destroys all continuity in terms of completion. You can't complete it by this movement of the mind, of consciousness, because life is complete at every second, but it's also new.
Yeah, and it's a complete overwhelm. It's just...
Yeah, well, we don't let it though. You do it too much. That's why he said something very strange there, no? He says, in awareness and attention, the beginning is the end. That's totality and timelessness at the same time. Oh, oh, to live that way, is it possible? But he says this is wholeness, see? This is the totality we're talking about, is that very immediacy of perception of the totality of life, which has no continuity, therefore is of the utmost danger to the psyche, which insists on continuity. It's a crisis. But to perceive the danger of the psyche as that which is standing against life is itself right action. He says, with this, we were to perceive this, we would then act as we act in any situation of danger. That's awareness. Ooh, I never came up with this before. To me, anyway, no, this was really very obvious to me. But I think because there are these phrases that he just throws, but how does that point to anything that we are sort of encountering in life? But that speaks to me, no? The sense of life is total at every moment, but is also new. And our knowledge cannot meet it. Therefore, that creates a crisis. The crisis in living is this. And therefore, becoming aware of the danger that that represents, we can therefore maybe act correctly if we perceive it fully. He says, but we avoid it, we escape from it, we make adjustments, right? Boy, he's inviting us to really have a crisis at every moment. Nobody wants to live that way. Live, I don't know how to put it, the only thing was live dangerously, right? Because life is dangerous, but actually is live creatively. It means to live creatively, right? That has to do with that, what we talk about, the knowledge of the application of the mechanical knowledge to life. There are parts of life, obviously, where it belongs, right? Life has a mechanical aspect. So in that aspect of knowledge, science, technology, and the rest, it can be applied. But to reduce life is totality to that, is to destroy it. Boy, what a diagnosis. No, I think it's very appropriate for the times we're living in. You can see how destructive we are. Maybe we have to bring that across somehow and ourselves, take it seriously. That life is total at every moment, and we can be finagling with it through this mechanical knowledge. That will not help us. That's why technology will not solve our problems. You can't. It just is much more immediate, much more total, much more timeless. Much more timeless? No, it's just timeless. There's no more timeless or less timeless. Time is out of the picture. It is extraordinary. That's why Krishnamurti defies understanding in that way, no? This question, no, Nora, I feel it defies understanding to see something totally, and you have to see the whole. Well, there we are. He wants to bring us to that very point in which we are completely empty of any before or after in the moment of living. Who can understand that? We can say it, and that's already amazing. That we can even put words to anything of this, because it's a total undefined, indescribable, yeah, almost unfathomable state. And that consciousness, and that we don't mean anything particular by it, the awareness and attention can be at that level. This is communication, to be at the same level, at the same time, with the same intensity as life itself, which has this creative, timeless dynamic and totality at every second, where the beginning and the end cannot be separated. Hi.
Yeah, that's interesting. This edge, between being and becoming, and the self being time, which I think you mentioned last session, Javier. So for me, it's like an acknowledgement, let's say, of phenomenology. This mechanical thing is happening. I can maybe provide explanations of it in terms of the metacognitive self, but there's also a recognition of this other thing in the background. And just, it's like, well, okay, both things are happening, and this is what I'm calling a life. And maybe I can travel a bit lighter, through this life. Maybe I won't lean into what I think I know quite so quickly. And I think it quite so quickly, and it cashes out in kind of a way where it shows up in a life being lived as a father, as a community member, etc. It's something that's just a little more forgiving, maybe just a little more compassionate. That's all, like it's and less suffering for others that are around me, it seems. So that to me is sort of the project. If there's any kind of a project, when I attend sessions like this, when I read about these things, when I punctuate my day with a kind of maybe just saying to myself, the quickest way out is to know I'm not in. Like that kind of a statement, or not knowing is most intimate, simple reminders that it's not just this thing that's occurring in time. It's just not always the mechanical mind that needs to be given primacy, That's all. Like, that's why I find these discussions, they're so beneficial, it seems, for the separate self that's listening, that needs to be reminded, of these things. I really have no desire to be fully integrated with the totality of things.
Happy with your particularity.
It seems okay to be, sort of progressively becoming maybe more compassionate or useful or whatever. I'm glad for differentiation, from the perspective of the mechanical mind. I'm actually, thankful that things are appearing as differentiated objects. Otherwise I wouldn't know what's going on, I guess. But anyway, that's my experience of these subjects.
Mm-hmm. But this is it. You see, the challenge of humanity, Krishnamurti is pushing it to the level at which we have it in us, potentially, to embody, if that's the word, that sense of totality. And that, without that, he sometimes goes as far as to say, life has very little meaning. Because the meaning of the particular is in its relationship to the total. And if you don't have a relationship to the total, that particular has very little meaning. He said that, something like that, in these readings. Ooh la la! You see, he throws a spanner in the works of my, personal happiness with my little things. Nothing wrong with that in the sense, right, of saying, we also have to be happy and contented with what we got, and the particularities of it. There's a poetry in it, no? There's a poetry in the specificity, in the fact that you were born this way, and this is the face your ancestors gave you, and this is the color of your hair, and this is just the way you live, the way you talk, the way you move, the way you eat, the way you live and die. So there are particularities which we have to live with, no question. And we have to do specific things in specific contexts, socioeconomic, geographical, cultural, you name it. Time is with us in that regard. Time persists. Time is a continuum. Biologically, psychologically, culturally, there is time. But Tenkei says that's never the totality. Cannot be. And without that totality, how do you even know it has any meaning? He throws the question of meaning right in my face. Says, how do you know? See, not even the question of knowledge, but the sense of the meaning of these things. Maybe you can sense it in their own relative context, right? The meaning of this action of mine in relation to this particular environment has the meaning of contributing to society by teaching English. So I teach English, all right? Suppose I'm not teaching English. Whatever I teach, history of philosophy or history of art. So do have a meaning in that regard. But us, this is the curious conscious. I don't know if you feel this, but the sense of consciousness itself is not, I don't know, maybe it can be reduced to these things. But he finds that there is something, or he has the intuition from ages ago, or maybe from our childhood, or from wherever, that there is an infinity of being, that these things can't quite encapsulate. And that my own little knowledge and my own little capacities, fair and useful and constructive even as they may be, are not quite what that totality, that intensity of being signifies, something else. And it is in relation to those things, to that infinity, that my life, in relation to everything else, because life, that is the total relationship. You see, our relationships are still partial. The relationship with the total is total relationship. If I may use the language a bit, take some freedoms with the language. That is total relationship. And that is like a pouring down into the world of that which is at the source of it and at the end of it. The end and the beginning is still with us. We can't separate it as we do in the normal, ordinary function of the world. And what he's calling for is the collapse of that time spread and of me as the very movement of separating beginning and end. The me is a separation of beginning and end. I'm sorry, I'm launching metaphysically. But sometimes I just feel also, just for, bear with me, I just feel the need to just maybe also break my own boundaries, if you like, in terms of even reflecting upon these things. We realize how limited the whole thing is. And that feeling, you see, is what he calls sort of a primary discontent. The fundamental flame of discontent has to do with that, has to do with the awareness of limitation and how far that goes. It includes consciousness itself as we know it. All self is limited. So why are we making so much of it? All identity is limitation by the very fact of identification. All sense of being through possession is already a fragmented entity. Well, wait, you see, that is where a sort of intelligence sensitivity brings us to this total questioning of any identification with anything. Therefore, the being cannot be a thing. And we live in a world of things, and we must live rightly in that world of things. But maybe we can't live rightly in the world of things unless we are nothing, because that may be what connects us with that which is at the source, which is the very foundation and ground of creation, life. Okay, my poetry is finished.
So, Jeremy, I have a question. So, to me, I haven't read Kay's work for a while, and this is my first class here. To me, just life exists. Why do we have to search for a meaning? I mean, I agree with you, trying not to focus. Everybody, point to the same direction. We try not to focus on our separation, right? Our separation with ourselves, our separation with other people, or our separation from life itself. But it does not necessarily mean we need to look for a meaning.
That is a very good question, I think, because I did bring the sense of meaning that has always been a significant word for me, a word with a lot of meaning. That's exactly what the question of meaning is very important, see, because Kay says, unless we really, how you say, tap, he used to even use that verb, tapping into the reservoir of goodness, which is wholeness. We won't be good. And what is our primary intent as human beings? In human consciousness, but the good. Everybody intends the good. This is what the Greeks used to say. Everybody intends the good. The problem is that most people don't know what it is. And so we're all confusing it, see? Meaning is in this wholeness. What? Why? Because meaning is significance, its value, right? And purpose. The meaning of our actions, the very meaning of our existence and its value is related to how it is in this harmonious, it's in harmony with the movement of life itself. That's where meaning is played out. That's the broader context, see? Where my particular being finds its meaning because it's related to the whole. See, if we relate meaning, the question is deeper, okay? I'm not quite answering it, but I'm just trying to also realize, you see, in literature, when I had to start studying literature, it was a standard phrase. Meaning is contextual, right? The word in a phrase, in a sentence, its meaning depends on the rest of the sentence. And the meaning of that sentence depends on the rest of the text. And life is like this. It's a continuous phenomenology of meaning. And intelligence is what's capable of reading that meaning. Meaning is inherent to the very nature of consciousness. The nature of being, maybe that's extending it, but at least to the nature of consciousness. There's no consciousness without meaning. And therefore, I think we can't escape it. That's what I'm trying to say. I may be wrong, by the way, Lucy, I may be wrong. But this is my sense that we can't escape it. In the act of being, the fact of being conscious, aware, is itself meaningful. Meaning is unavoidable, but because it's in being and it's in relationship above all. Meaning is relationship. And we don't have relationship, and therefore, we don't have much meaning. All right, here I think we're slightly over the time. Okay, this is all, there are many broader questions, and sometimes I launch into this sort of broader explorations of ventures into trying to grasp the whole. The whole can't be grasped in words necessarily, but I still trust that we do have to question deeply, and we have to venture into, opening new windows of perception in terms of what our experience, what we are living with and for. This is very important to me. So that's all.
Well, thank you everyone for participating in this session. Thank you, Javier, again.
Okay. Well, we're on a journey together, my
Sometimes.
friends. Hopefully, we are discovering things.
I would encourage everyone to read the chapters in The Urgency of Change as a preparation for each one of these sessions to benefit the most out of it, out of the series. And I'd also like to just briefly mention that we are going to hold a workshop with Cynthia Overweg in February, which is along the same lines, but from a slightly different approach because she has her own understanding as to this material, this teaching and this approach, and you might find it very interesting. And she takes her workshops very seriously. She prepares with beautiful videos and I mean slides. Sorry, slides. And adds all. It's a multicultural presentation, not just multimedia. Sorry, multimedia presentation. And you might find it interesting and worthwhile. So I just want to mention that. You can check out our website, for more information. So thanks all of you again. Keep well.
Bye-bye, everyone. Ciao.
Thanks, Fabian.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.